I was lugging those heavy grocery bags, climbing onto the second bus of the night, my legs trembling with exhaustion after a 14-hour workday. My cracked hands gripped the plastic handles that dug into my skin, and the bus driver looked at me with impatience. It was my second job of the day, and I still had to go home to cook, clean, and listen to the same old complaints. At 64 years old, I was the only one keeping our household afloat. My 35-year-old son, Brandon, and my 30-year-old daughter-in-law, Ashley, had been lounging on the sofa for 2 full years. 2 years without a job, 2 years living off my meager paychecks, 2 years treating me like their personal maid. The bus filled up quickly, and I was left standing, swaying with bags that felt like they were filled with stones. My worn-out shoes pinched my swollen feet, and I felt a cold sweat trickle down my back. People pushed past me without an apology, as if I were invisible, as if an old woman carrying groceries didn't deserve a single glance of compassion. But I was used to it. My whole life had been like this, invisible to everyone, useful only for work, and spending my money on others. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying not to think about what awaited me at home. Brandon would be sprawled on the couch with the TV blaring, surrounded by dirty dishes and empty beer bottles. Ashley would be beside him, painting her nails or watching videos on her phone, with that annoyed expression she always wore when I walked in. Neither of them would move to help me with the bags. Neither would ask how my day had been. They would just wait for me to make dinner, wash their clothes, and clean up the mess they left all over the house. My eyes filled with tears of anger and exhaustion, but I held them back. I couldn't cry there on a bus full of strangers. I had to be strong, as I always was. I had to keep going, because if I didn't, who would? My husband had died 5 years ago, and since then, I had carried everything on my own. The bills, the house, the responsibility of supporting 2 adults who refused to grow up. That's when I heard it. A man 2 seats ahead was talking on the phone, his voice audible over the roar of the engine. At first, I paid no attention, but something in his urgent tone made me perk up my ears. He spoke quietly, but I could make out every word. Yes, Theodore, I'm sure. The last name matches perfectly. Eleanor Jensen, 64 years old, lives in the Oakwood neighborhood. She's the only heir we have left to locate. My heart stopped for a second. That was my first name. That was my age. My neighborhood was Oakwood. The inheritance is substantial. We're talking about more than $3 million. Her paternal uncle left her as the primary beneficiary in his will, but we've been trying to find her for months. The bags nearly fell from my hands. My legs turned to jelly, and I had to grab onto the metal pole to keep from collapsing. That number echoed in my head like a distant sound. Me, who worked 2 jobs just to scrape together $400 a month, who counted every penny just to buy groceries, who wore secondhand clothes and worn-out shoes. Me, the invisible woman no one respected, whom everyone saw as a burden. The man continued speaking. We're going to her address tomorrow. We hope she's there. This woman has no idea what's coming. Her life is about to change forever. He hung up and stared out the window, completely oblivious to the earthquake he had just unleashed inside of me. I stood paralyzed, processing what I had just heard. Could it be possible? After so many years of suffering, of humiliation, of working like a dog, was life finally giving me a break? Then a cruel voice in my head whispered that maybe it was a mistake, that maybe there was another Eleanor Jensen, that I didn't deserve such luck. The bus braked abruptly, and I almost lost my balance. My stop was approaching, and with it, the return to my reality. Brandon and Ashley would be waiting for me with their annoyed faces, asking what I had brought for dinner, demanding I serve them as always. But for the first time in years, something had changed inside me. That conversation had planted a seed of hope in my withered heart. I got off the bus with the heavy bags, but my steps had a different energy. My eyes, which had been full of tired tears just moments before, now shone with a new spark. I didn't know what was waiting for me, but I had a feeling my story was about to take a turn no one, especially Brandon and Ashley, could imagine. I walked down the dark street, carrying the bags, but each step brought me closer to a reality I already knew by heart. My two-story house, which had been my pride when my husband was alive, now looked neglected and sad. The windows were dirty, the yard was full of weeds, and the paint was peeling from the walls. Everything reflected the abandonment we lived in since Brandon and Ashley had turned my home into their personal haven of laziness. Before I opened the door, I could hear the television volume turned up to the max and the stupid laughter coming from inside. As always, my free tenants were enjoying their day off. Day number 730 of consecutive days off, to be exact. I took a deep breath, tucked the secret I had just discovered deep into my heart, and pushed open the door to my own house. The scene that greeted me was the same as always, but after what I had heard on the bus, I saw it with different eyes. Brandon was sprawled across my favorite armchair, the one I had worked so hard to buy 10 years ago, with his dirty, bare feet on the coffee table. His prominent belly poked out from under a stained t-shirt he had been wearing for 3 days. Beside him, Ashley was sprawled like a queen, taking up the entire 3-seater sofa, her greasy hair in a messy ponytail, her eyes glued to her phone. "Finally, you're here, old woman," Brandon grunted without even turning to look at me. "I thought you died on the way. What did you bring for dinner? Hope it's not another one of your cheap poverty meals." His voice had that contemptuous tone he had perfected during these 2 years of professional freeloading. Ashley cackled like a hyena without looking up from her screen. I set the bags down on the kitchen floor, feeling my arms finally free from the weight that had been my companion for 2 hours of public transit. My hands trembled slightly, not from exhaustion this time, but from a strange emotion I hadn't felt in years. The possibility of power. But I decided it was best to act as I always did, at least for now. "I brought chicken and rice," I said in the quiet voice they had learned to expect from me. "It'll be ready in 20 minutes. Ashley huffed with disdain from the sofa, as if my offer were a personal insult to her refined palate. Refined, of course, the palate of a woman who hadn't cooked an egg in 2 years. "Mom!" Brandon yelled from the living room. "The beer ran out yesterday, and I had to drink water like a farmer. Next time you go out, bring 2 whole cases, and not that cheap brand you buy. Ashley and I deserve better." His tone was that of a boss giving orders to his employee, not a son speaking to his mother. But I was used to it. Long ago, I had stopped being his mother and become his personal provider. While I took things out of the bags, I looked at the house from a completely new perspective. Those furnishings that Brandon and Ashley used as if they were their own, those beds they slept in without paying a single cent of rent, that food I bought with the sweat of my brow working 14 hours a day. All of it was mine. The house was in my name. I paid the bills. Even the electricity and water they wasted came from my worn-out pockets. Ashley got up from the sofa with the grace of a manatee and walked toward the kitchen, dragging her pink slippers that had seen better days. She leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed, watching me as if I were a zoo animal, entertaining her with my movements. "Eleanor," she said with that malicious smirk I hated so much, "my mom told me that Mrs. Davis, your neighbor, got her daughter a job in an office. She makes about $500 a month. Imagine that. Meanwhile, you're out here working like crazy just to bring crumbs into this house." She laughed at her own comment, savoring every word that came from her venomous mouth. "That's why Brandon and I think it's time for you to look for a 3rd job. We need more money to live better. We can't keep eating chicken and rice every day like we're beggars." Her look of satisfaction made me sick. This woman, who hadn't lifted a finger in 2 years, who woke up at noon and went to bed watching TV, was demanding I work more to maintain her princess lifestyle. Brandon appeared in the kitchen, probably attracted by the scent of cruel conversation he enjoyed so much. He walked to the refrigerator, opened it, and stared inside with a look of disappointment, as if he expected to find a 5-star banquet instead of the food scraps I bought with my tips. "Look at this, Ashley," he said, pointing to the almost empty refrigerator. "This is what happens when a useless old woman manages the household money. There's nothing worth eating in here. My friends laugh at me when I tell them how we live. They say my mom's a failure who could never give us a decent life." His words cut me like knives, but this time they didn't hurt like before. This time, behind the pain, something stronger was growing in my chest, a certainty, a silent promise that everything was about to change very soon. While he was talking, I remembered the voice of that man on the bus. Her life is about to change forever. Brandon's right, Ashley continued, emboldened by her accomplice's support. Look how you live, Eleanor. Worn-out shoes, old clothes, working like a slave. Don't you feel embarrassed? At your age, I would have already found a way to live better, but I guess some people are just born to be poor and settle for scraps. She moved closer to me with that cruel smile she had perfected during these years of forced cohabitation. That's why we're here, to take care of you, to make sure you don't do any more stupid things with the little money you bring in. We're like your guardians, you know? Without us, you'd probably be living on the street already. Brandon nodded proudly, as if Ashley had just said the wisest words in the world. He poured the last glass of juice from the refrigerator and looked at me with that air of superiority he had inherited from his father, but applied in the most despicable way possible. Exactly, Mom. Ashley and I are your salvation. Imagine what your life would be like without us here, taking care of you, keeping you company. You'd be a lonely old woman talking to herself in this empty house. You should thank us for allowing you to serve us. We give purpose to your miserable life. I finished taking the groceries out of the bags, put everything in its place, and turned on the stove to start preparing their dinner. They stood there, waiting for me to react with tears or pleas, as I had so many times before, waiting for me to apologize for being a burden, to promise I'd work harder, to thank them for their generosity in living in my house for free. But this time was different. This time, as I chopped the chicken and rinsed the rice, a very small smile appeared on my lips, so small that they couldn't see it, because I had a secret they didn't know, a secret that was about to change everything. And for the first time in years, I felt that revenge wasn't just an impossible dream. The next morning arrived like every other during these 2 hellish years. My alarm clock rang at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I got out of my hard, cold bed to start another 14-hour workday. Brandon and Ashley were still sleeping in their room, the one that used to be my guest room, and which they had now turned into their personal palace. I could hear their snores through the thin walls, the sounds of 2 people sleeping without worries, without responsibilities, without a shred of guilt for the life they led. I put on my work uniform, that white blouse I had washed so many times it looked gray, and my black skirt that had a small hole in it. A tear I had mended with a different color thread because I didn't have money to buy one that matched. My black shoes, the only pair I owned, were so worn out that I could feel the cold pavement through the broken soles. But today was different. Today, as I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, I saw something new in my eyes, a spark that had been extinguished for years. I left the house in silence as I always did, so as not to wake the royalty of laziness. The cold morning air hit my face, but I walked toward the bus stop with firmer steps than usual. During the entire trip to my first job, I couldn't stop thinking about that conversation I had overheard. Could it be true? Did that inheritance really exist, or had it just been a cruel coincidence of names? I arrived at the diner where I had been working as a waitress for 3 years, a small, greasy place where customers treated me like I was part of the furniture. But today, as I served coffee and wiped down tables, my mind was somewhere else. I was imagining the faces of Brandon and Ashley when they discovered that their useless old woman was a millionaire. The image made me smile as I cleared dirty dishes and endured the cook's shouts. When my shift ended at noon, I didn't go straight to my second job as I always did. This time, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable a day before. I went to the public library to use the free computers and search for information about inheritances and wills. I needed to know if what I had heard could be real. For 2 hours, I read about legal processes, heir finders, and cases similar to what might be mine. My heart beat faster with every page I read. Everything seemed to indicate that these things did happen in real life, that there were companies specializing in finding lost heirs, that multi-million-dollar inheritances from distant relatives weren't just things in movies. When I arrived at my second job, an office building I cleaned after everyone had gone home, I had a completely different energy. As I vacuumed and emptied wastebaskets, my head was buzzing with plans. If it really was true, if I was really going to receive that amount of money, what would be the first thing I'd do? How would I react to Brandon and Ashley? Would I give them a chance to redeem themselves, or would I kick them out immediately? I got home after 10 o'clock at night, later than usual because of my stop at the library. The scene that greeted me was even worse than the day before. Brandon and Ashley had decided to invite some of their lazy friends over, and my living room was full of people I didn't even know, drinking my beer and eating my food. "Look who's here!" Ashley yelled in a slurred voice. She had clearly been drinking since earlier. "The queen of cleaning! The woman who works so much she can't even get home in time to serve her family." Her friends cackled like hyenas, all of them women my age who seemed to have found the secret to living without working. Brandon was sitting in my favorite armchair, surrounded by 3 men who seemed to be even more run-down versions of himself. They all had that lost look of someone who hadn't done anything productive in years, that empty arrogance of someone who mistakes laziness for intelligence. "Friends, I'd like you to meet my mom," Brandon said with a mocking smile. "The woman who supports Ashley and me because we're too smart to work in slave jobs like her. Isn't she adorable?" His friends laughed heartily, as if he had just told the funniest joke in the world. A heavy-set woman with dyed red hair came toward me, a glass in her hand, swaying slightly. "Oh, honey, you're such a martyr, working so hard at your age to support these boys. To be honest, if I were you, I would have kicked them out already, but I guess you just don't have the backbone to do something like that." "But my mom is so nice," Ashley interrupted from the sofa, with that syrupy voice she used when she wanted to be especially cruel. "So nice that she even lets us live in her humble little house for free. Right, Eleanor? Tell my friends how much you make a month so they know what economic level we're talking about." The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes were on me, waiting for my response, some with mockery, others with pity, but all with that air of superiority that made them feel better than me. I felt my cheeks flush with shame and anger, but something inside me remained firm. The secret I carried was like an invisible shield protecting me from their words. "Come on, Mom," Brandon insisted, enjoying the moment. "Don't be shy. Tell them how much money you bring into this house every month. Tell them how you live from tip to tip, from penny to penny. My friends are curious to meet the poorest woman in the neighborhood." One of his friends, a bald man with a beer belly, laughed so hard he snorted some beer. "Seriously? Your mom supports the whole family with waitressing and cleaning jobs? Man, you are lucky. I have to work to support myself." "Oh, but you don't understand," Ashley continued, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. "Eleanor isn't just our financial provider, she's also our personal maid. She cooks, she cleans, she washes our clothes, she does the shopping. It's like having a housekeeper who pays you to work for them." Laughter filled my living room, the kind of cruel laughter that burrowed into my ears like daggers. One of Ashley's friends, a skinny woman with yellow teeth, clapped sarcastically. "How clever you two are! You found the perfect way to live without effort, although poor lady working so hard to support 2 lazy adults must be very tough." "Lazy? Me?" Brandon protested with feigned indignation. "I'm not lazy. I'm selective. I'm not going to work just anywhere for scraps like her. I'm waiting for the perfect opportunity, the job I truly deserve. In the meantime, my mom can support us. That's what moms are for, right?" Ashley got up from the sofa and walked toward me with that venomous smile I knew so well. She stood very close, so close I could smell the alcohol on her breath. "Besides, we're doing her a favor by staying here. Can you imagine how lonely this poor woman would be without our company? Who else would want to live with someone so boring and miserable?" "It's true," Brandon added, encouraged by his audience's laughter. "Without us, this house would be a cemetery. We bring her life, joy, purpose. She should pay us for the favor we're doing her." His friends burst into laughter again, as if he had just said something brilliant. I stood there at the entrance to my own house, holding my work bag, watching as a group of strangers made fun of my life in my own living room, feeling my years of sacrifice become the nightly entertainment of a bunch of freeloaders. But this time, even though my eyes filled with tears of humiliation, even though I felt my hands trembling with rage, even though I wanted to scream until I lost my voice, I said nothing. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I didn't allow their words to destroy me as they had so many times before, because I had something they didn't know, an ace up my sleeve that was about to change everything. And as I went up the stairs to my room, listening to their laughs mocking my retreat, a small but real smile appeared on my lips. Very soon, very, very soon, those laughs were going to turn into tears, and this time, I would be the one smiling. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 p.m. the next day. I was in the kitchen preparing a simple lunch because it was my day off from my first job when I heard that sound that made my heart stop completely. Brandon and Ashley were in their usual positions on the sofa, watching TV and eating the leftover pizza they had ordered with the money I had left for emergencies. "Mom, go get it," Brandon yelled without moving an inch. "It's probably someone selling something we can't afford." Ashley laughed at his comment as if he were the most witty person in the world. Neither of them had the slightest idea of what was about to happen. I walked to the door with trembling legs, wiping my sweaty hands on my old apron. Through the frosted glass, I could see the silhouette of an elegant man in a dark suit. My breathing accelerated so much I thought I was going to faint right there. Could it be him? Was it the person who had been talking on the phone on the bus? I opened the door slowly and there he was, a man around 50 with perfectly styled gray hair, an impeccable black suit, and a professional yet kind smile. In his hand was a leather briefcase that seemed to contain important documents. Beside him was a younger man, also formally dressed, who appeared to be his assistant. "Mrs. Eleanor Jensen?" the older man asked in a clear, polite voice. His accent was refined, completely different from the voices I was used to hearing in my neighborhood. "My name is Peter Wallace. I'm a lawyer specializing in estates. This is my colleague, Theodore Vance. Could we speak with you privately? We have some very important news to give you." My knees almost buckled when I heard their names. Peter and Theodore, the same names I had heard in that phone conversation that had changed my world. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't my imagination. It was real. All of it was completely real. "Of course," I managed to whisper, though my voice sounded like a croak. "Come in, please." I invited them in, but at that moment, I remembered the disaster Brandon and Ashley had left in the living room. Dirty dishes, empty bottles, clothes scattered everywhere. My house looked exactly like what it was, the refuge of 2 irresponsible adults living like eternal college kids. Peter and Theodore walked in, and their eyes immediately scanned the living room. I could see their expressions change slightly when they saw Brandon and Ashley sprawled on the furniture like 2 seals on a beach. My son was wearing the same dirty t-shirt from yesterday, and Ashley was in pink sweatpants stained with food that she seemed not to have taken off in days. "Who are you guys?" Brandon asked with his characteristic lack of manners, looking at the lawyers as if they were aliens. "Mom, I hope you haven't gotten yourself into some debt. We don't have money to pay for anything." Ashley sat up on the sofa, trying to fix her greasy hair with her hands. For the first time in months, I saw her nervous, probably because the presence of these elegant men made her conscious of how bad she looked. "Eleanor, what's going on here? Why are there strangers in our house?" Peter looked at me with an expression that mixed professionalism with compassion. He had clearly understood the family dynamic that existed in my home. "Mrs. Jensen, it would be better if we spoke in a more private place. What we have to discuss is of a confidential and very delicate nature." "No," Brandon interrupted, getting up from the armchair with clumsy movements. "If it has to do with my mom, it has to do with me. I'm her son, and Ashley is my wife. We're a family. There are no secrets here." His tone had become aggressive, as always when he felt he was losing control of a situation. Peter exchanged a meaningful glance with Theodore and then looked directly into my eyes. "Mrs. Jensen, are you sure you want these people to be present during our conversation? What we are about to reveal is very sensitive information." Something inside me awakened at that moment. A strength I hadn't felt in years, a courage I thought was lost forever. I looked at Brandon and Ashley, who were watching me with that familiar mix of curiosity and arrogance. I thought of all the years of humiliation, of all the nights I had cried in silence, of all the times they had treated me like their personal maid. "Yes," I said in a voice firmer than I had used in a long time. "I want them to stay. I want them to hear everything you have to say to me." Because deep in my heart, I knew that what I was about to hear was going to be the sweetest moment of my life, the moment Brandon and Ashley would discover they had been mistreating the wrong person. Peter nodded and opened his briefcase with precise movements. He took out a thick folder full of documents that looked very official. The silence in the living room became so thick you could cut it with a knife. Even the television had been silenced, as if the universe itself wanted to witness this historic moment. "Mrs. Eleanor Jensen," Peter began in a solemn voice, "we have been looking for you for the past 6 months. You are the sole heir to the estate of your paternal uncle, Mr. Robert Wilson, who passed away last year in Los Angeles, California." Brandon and Ashley looked at each other with confused expressions. They clearly didn't understand the magnitude of what was happening. To them, the word inheritance probably meant some old furniture or maybe a few $100s. "Robert Wilson," I murmured, feigning surprise, although my heart already knew the answer. I haven't heard from him in more than 30 years. I didn't even know he had died. Theodore came closer and showed me a black and white photograph of a man I vaguely remembered from my childhood. "Your Uncle Robert immigrated to the United States in the 80s and never married or had children. He built a real estate empire in California, and in his will, he named you as his only heir." "Real estate empire?" Ashley asked in a squeaky voice, as if the words were from a foreign language. Her face had completely changed, and for the first time since I had known her, I saw her truly nervous. Peter looked me directly in the eyes before pronouncing the words he knew were going to change everything forever. "Mrs. Jensen, the total estate you are about to inherit has an estimated value of $3.4 million. That includes properties, investments, bank accounts, and some additional assets." The silence that followed was deafening. Brandon's mouth hung open like a fish out of water, and Ashley simply slumped onto the sofa as if someone had taken all the bones out of her body. Their faces of absolute shock were worth more than all the millions I had just inherited. Three million? Brandon stammered, as if the words were too big for his mouth. "Real dollars?" Peter smiled professionally. "Completely real, young man. Your mother is now a very wealthy woman. The legal procedures are already practically completed. We just need Mrs. Jensen to sign some documents and provide official identification." Ashley got up from the sofa, as if she had received an electric shock. Her face had completely changed, and suddenly all her arrogance had disappeared. "Eleanor, my dear Eleanor," she began in a syrupy voice I had never heard her use. "What wonderful news! We're so happy for you, aren't we, Brandon?" My son nodded like a wind-up doll, clearly trying to process the information that had just exploded in his head. "Yes, Mom, of course, we're very excited. We knew that someday your life would change. We always believed in you." I looked at both of them, and for the first time in years, I was the one who felt like laughing. Because after 2 years of humiliation, of mockery, of treating me like their maid, now that they knew I had money, suddenly I was loved and they had always believed in me. But I didn't say anything. I just smiled. A small, silent smile, but one full of promises, because this was only the beginning. And the best part, definitely the best part, was yet to come. The next few days were the strangest of my entire life. After Peter and Theodore left with my promise to go to their offices the next day to sign the papers, the transformation of Brandon and Ashley was so sudden it would have been comical if it hadn't been so pathetic. Overnight, they went from treating me like their personal maid to acting as if I were the Queen of England. That same evening, Ashley appeared in the kitchen while I was preparing dinner, but instead of demanding that I serve her as she always did, she stood beside me with a smile so fake it hurt to look at. "Eleanor, my dear mother-in-law," she said in a sugary voice, "why don't you sit down and rest? I can finish cooking. You've worked so hard all these years. You deserve a break." Brandon was not to be outdone in his performance. He appeared a few minutes later with my old slippers in his hands, the same ones he had stepped on and kicked 100 times when he found them in his way. "Mom, put on these comfy slippers and sit on the couch. Ashley and I will take care of everything tonight. It's the least we can do for you after so many years of sacrifice." I sat in my own armchair, the same one where Brandon had put his dirty feet for 2 years, and watched them move around the house like two very bad actors rehearsing a play they didn't know. Ashley tried to cook, but it was obvious she had no idea how to even turn on the stove correctly. Brandon tried to clean the table, but he did it so clumsily he ended up knocking more things to the floor. "Don't worry about it," I told them with a calmness I hadn't felt in years. "I can do it. I'm used to it." But they insisted, desperate to show that they were devoted children, not the freeloaders they really had been. During dinner, which Ashley had slightly burned because she didn't know how to control the heat, their attempts at conversation were even more pathetic. "Eleanor," Ashley said, chewing with feigned delicacy, "I've been thinking about everything you've done for us. You're such a strong woman, so brave. Brandon and I have always admired your dedication to work." Brandon nodded so vigorously, I thought he was going to hurt his neck. "Exactly, Mom. We've always respected you. When my friends came over and we made jokes, it was just because we were nervous. We knew you were special, that something big was going to happen to you. We were right, weren't we?" I ate in silence, savoring every bite, not just of the burned food, but of the delicious situation unfolding before my eyes. They didn't know that I had overheard the conversation on the bus before the lawyers arrived. They thought the inheritance had been a surprise for me, too. They had no idea I had had days to plan exactly what I was going to do. The next day, when I returned from Peter's offices with all the papers signed and the bank accounts activated, Brandon and Ashley were waiting for me in the living room, like two eager puppies waiting for their owner. The house was cleaner than it had been in months, and I could smell that they had used my most expensive air freshener, the one I had saved for special occasions that never came. "How did it go, Mom?" Brandon asked, with a smile so wide it looked like his face was going to split in two. "Are you officially a millionaire?" He tried to make his question sound casual, but I could see the greed shining in his eyes like neon lights. "Everything went well," I replied with the same calmness I had maintained for days. "The lawyers said that in a week I'll have complete access to all the funds." What I didn't tell them was that Peter had given me an advance of $50,000 for immediate expenses, money that was already safe in a new bank account I had opened in my name alone. Ashley came toward me, and for the first time in 2 years, she hugged me. It was a fake, calculated hug, but she did it with so much theatricality, it looked like we were starring in a soap opera. "Eleanor, I'm so happy for you. You deserve it so much after all you've been through." "Exactly," Brandon added, sitting next to me on the sofa, with a closeness he hadn't shown since he was a child. "Ashley and I have decided that we're going to take care of you better than ever. We're going to make sure you don't have to worry about anything. We're going to manage your money, protect you from people who try to take advantage of you." There it was, the real reason behind their entire performance. It wasn't filial love. It wasn't regret for how they had treated me. It was pure and simple ambition to control my money. They wanted to become my managers to continue living off my work, but now with a much more generous budget. "We've been doing some research," Ashley continued with feigned enthusiasm. "We think you should buy a bigger house in a better neighborhood, a house where we can all live comfortably with enough space for a family like ours." "And a new car?" Brandon added, his eyes sparkling with greed. "You need a new car, Mom. Something safe and reliable. Ashley and I could help you drive it, of course. We're younger. We have better reflexes." I listened to their plans with a serene smile, pretending I was considering each of their suggestions. They interpreted my silence as acceptance, and their ideas became more and more elaborate. They talked about family vacations, investments they could oversee, and businesses they could manage in my name. In their minds, they had already spent my millions 3 times over. That night, while they slept soundly, dreaming of my money, I stayed awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling and feeling a satisfaction I had never experienced. For decades, I had been invisible, ignored, and belittled, but now I had something they desperately wanted, and for the first time in my life, I had the power. The next few days were a comedy of errors starring Brandon and Ashley. They got up early to make me breakfast, even though neither of them knew how to cook well. They offered to do the shopping, although they always forgot to bring back the change. They cleaned the house, although they broke more things than they fixed, all because they thought that by being nice to me, I would share my fortune with them. The funniest part was that they had started inviting their friends over again, but this time to show off. "My mother-in-law is a millionaire," Ashley would say to anyone who would listen. "We're a very lucky family now." Brandon would tell elaborate stories about how he had always known I had the potential to be rich, as if my inheritance had been the result of something I had done, and not the death of an uncle I didn't even remember. But I had my own plans. During those days of family acting, I was very busy making discreet phone calls, visiting offices when they thought I was at the supermarket, and preparing a surprise that neither of them imagined. A week after the lawyers appeared at my door, I had everything ready. I had spoken with a real estate agent about selling the house. I had consulted with an accountant about the best ways to invest my money. I had visited a different lawyer to draft some important documents, and most importantly of all, I had made a decision about Brandon and Ashley's future in my life. That night, as we were having dinner, another of their badly prepared meals, I smiled at them with genuine happiness. "Kids," I said in a sweet voice, "tomorrow we're going to have a little family meeting. There are some important things I want to discuss with you about our future." Their faces lit up like Christmas trees. They clearly thought I was going to officially announce my decision to share my fortune with them. They had no idea that the show they had been putting on for a week was about to end, and that the ending I had planned was going to be much more satisfying than anything they could imagine. The morning of our family meeting arrived with a clear sky that seemed to be celebrating with me. Brandon and Ashley woke up earlier than ever, and I could hear them whispering excitedly in their room as they got ready for what they thought would be the most important day of their lives. They were probably calculating how much money each of them would get, planning what they would buy first, imagining the life of luxury that was about to begin for them. I dressed with special care that morning. I put on my best dress, an emerald green one I had bought years ago for a wedding and had never had another occasion to wear. I styled my hair in a different, more elegant way, and even put on a little of the makeup I had saved for months. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I hadn't seen in years. A woman with dignity, with power, with control over her own life. Ashley greeted me in the kitchen with a smile so wide it looked like her face had been put on backward. "Eleanor, you look beautiful today. That dress looks wonderful on you. Is it new?" Of course it wasn't new. She had seen me wear it before. But now that I had money, everything of mine seemed different to her, more valuable, more worthy of positive comments. "Thank you, Ashley," I replied, with a smile she interpreted as gratitude, but which was really pure anticipation. "You both look very nice today, too." And it was true. Brandon had put on a button-down shirt I didn't remember seeing in months, and Ashley was wearing a yellow dress she had probably rescued from the back of her closet for the special occasion. We had breakfast together like a normal family, something we hadn't done in years. They talked animatedly about the weather, about the news, about anything that would keep the conversation light and pleasant. It was obvious they were nervous, but also excited. Every now and then, they would look at each other conspiratorially, like two plotters about to receive the grand prize of the lottery. After breakfast, we sat in the living room. I took my favorite armchair, the same one where Brandon had put his dirty feet for 2 years. and they made themselves comfortable on the sofa across from me like two students waiting for the results of an exam they knew they had passed with flying colors. "Well," I began in a calm voice, "as you know, my life has changed completely in the last week. This inheritance has been a blessing I never expected, and I've had time to think a lot about what I'm going to do with this opportunity." Brandon leaned forward, his eyes shining with anticipation. "Of course, Mom. You've worked so hard your whole life. You deserve to enjoy this money. Ashley and I are here to support you in any decision you make." "Exactly," Ashley added in a syrupy voice. "We're a family, and families support each other. What's yours is ours, and what's ours is yours. It's always been that way between us." Their ability to rewrite history was so impressive, I almost felt like applauding. I nodded slowly, as if I were deeply considering their words. "You're right about families. Real families support each other. They respect each other. They take care of each other. They work together to get ahead." I paused dramatically, enjoying the anticipation that was building on their faces. "That's why I've made some important decisions." Their smiles grew even wider, if that was possible. Brandon rubbed his hands together as if he could already feel the bills between his fingers. Ashley settled into the sofa with the posture of a queen awaiting her coronation. "First," I continued in a clear, firm voice, "I've decided to sell this house. It's too big for one person, and frankly, it holds too many painful memories." Their smiles flickered slightly, but they recovered quickly. They probably thought we were all going to move into a mansion together. "Second, I've bought a new house, a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood with a garden and a view of the park, a house where I can start a new chapter of my life." Ashley clapped her hands like a little girl, and Brandon gave a thumbs-up gesture of approval. "Third," I said, and here my voice became a little more serious, "I've decided to make some important donations. I'm going to give money to organizations that help working women, to seniors who live alone, to people who really need a second chance at life." "How noble of you, Mom," Brandon said, though I could detect a slight nervousness in his voice. "But don't donate everything. You also have to think about your family, about the people who have always been there for you." I smiled at his comment. "Oh, don't worry, Brandon. I have definitely thought about the people who have been there for me. I've thought about them a lot." I got up from my armchair and walked to the window, turning my back on them for a moment so they couldn't see the smile that was spreading across my face. "In fact," I continued, turning to face them again, "I've thought so much about the two of you that I've made a very special decision about your future." Their eyes lit up as if it were Christmas and their birthdays at the same time. "I've decided that it's time for you to learn to be independent. It's time for you to discover how wonderful it feels to work, to earn your own money, to build your own life with your own two hands." The atmosphere in the room changed subtly. Their smiles froze, as if they weren't sure they had heard correctly. "What exactly do you mean, Mom?" Brandon asked in a cautious voice. "I mean that my new house has only 2 bedrooms, one for me and one for occasional guests. There's no space for permanent residents." The words fell into the silence like stones into a calm lake. Ashley laughed nervously. "But Eleanor, surely you can buy a bigger house. With $3 million, you can afford a huge house where we can all live comfortably." "I could," I admitted, "but I don't want to. You see, these last few days have been very revealing for me. I've had time to reflect on the last 2 years, on how I've been treated in my own house, on what family really means." Brandon stood up abruptly, and I could see his kind face slowly disappearing. "Mom, I don't understand what you're getting at. We are your family. We've taken care of you all these years." "Taken care of me?" I repeated, and for the first time in weeks, I let some of my true emotion leak into my voice. "Is that what you call what you've done? Because I remember things very differently." Ashley stood up too, and I could see genuine panic starting to form in her eyes. "Eleanor, I think you're confused. Maybe the stress of this whole situation is getting to you. Brandon and I have always treated you with respect and affection." I walked to a side table where I'd placed a small box that morning. I opened it slowly and took out a thick envelope. "How interesting that you mention respect and affection," I said, holding the envelope in my hands. "Because I've prepared something special for you, a gift that reflects the exact same level of respect and affection you've shown me during these 2 years." Their eyes fixed on the envelope, as if it were a venomous snake. The air in the room had become so tense you could cut it with a knife. And I, for the first time in years, felt completely in control of the situation. The moment I had been waiting for had finally arrived, the moment of truth, the moment Brandon and Ashley were going to discover that their days of free luxury had come to an end. I opened the envelope slowly, savoring every second of the tension that had taken over the room. Brandon and Ashley looked at me as if I were a bomb about to explode, and in a way I was. I took out 2 identical, perfectly folded documents and held them in my hands as if they were the most important letters in the world. "These," I said in a clear, firm voice, "are lease agreements. 2 separate leases for 2 small but decent apartments on the other side of town. The first 3 months are paid for, courtesy of me. After that, you'll have to take care of your own expenses." The silence that followed was so profound I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock that had belonged to my mother. Brandon's mouth hung open like a fish out of water, and Ashley seemed to have turned into a statue of salt. Their brains were clearly struggling to process the information they had just received. "Apartments?" Ashley finally murmured, as if the word were from a foreign language. "Separate? Why separate?" I smiled with the sweetness of a grandmother giving advice to her beloved grandchildren. "Because I firmly believe that you need time to find yourselves. Brandon, you're 35 years old, and you've never lived on your own. Ashley, you're 30, and you moved directly from your parents' house to mine. Neither of you has had the opportunity to discover who you really are when you don't have someone else supporting you." Brandon's face turned as red as a tomato. "Mom, this is ridiculous. We're a family. Married people live together. You can't separate us like this." "I'm not separating you," I replied calmly. "I'm giving you an opportunity. If you truly love each other as much as you say you do, if you're really a solid couple, then you'll be able to overcome a few months of living separately while you each learn to support yourselves financially." Ashley came toward me with hesitant steps, as if she were walking on thin ice. "Eleanor, dear, I think you're not thinking clearly. Why would you want us to leave? We're happy here. You're happy with us here. We've always been a close-knit family." I looked her directly in the eyes, and for the first time in 2 years, she was the one who looked away first. "Ashley, would you like me to go over some of the most memorable moments of our family life together? Would you like me to recall the time you called me a useless old woman in front of your friends, or when Brandon told his friends I was the poorest woman in the neighborhood?" Their faces turned pale as they realized that I remembered every humiliation, every insult, every moment of contempt they had made me endure. Brandon tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand to silence him. "Or maybe you'd prefer we remember the night last week when your friends were here, making fun of my job, my clothes, my entire life, while you laughed as if it were the funniest show in the world." "Those were just jokes," Brandon stammered, but his voice sounded weak and unconvincing. "We weren't serious. We were just playing." "Playing?" I repeated, and let a little ice seep into my voice. 2 years of constant mockery was a game? Treating me like your personal maid was fun? Spending my money while you called me a failure was your form of entertainment? Ashley tried to get closer, but I took a step back. "Eleanor, if we hurt you, it was by accident. Maybe sometimes we were a little harsh, but it was because we were stressed. Not having a job is very difficult, and sometimes people say things they shouldn't." "By accident?" I asked, and laughed for the first time in the conversation. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a laugh full of years of accumulated pain. "Ashley, you made an art out of humiliating me. You were creative, consistent, and very deliberate." Brandon walked to the table where I had left the lease agreements and picked them up with trembling hands. "Mom, these apartments are in the cheapest neighborhood in town. They're horrible places. We can't live there." They are perfect places for people who are starting their independent lives, I replied. They're safe, clean, and completely adequate for someone who is going to work to pay their own rent. Work! Ashley yelled as if I had uttered a blasphemy. Eleanor, you have $3 million. You can support us comfortably for the rest of our lives. Why would you want us to suffer by working when it's not necessary? I looked at her with a mix of astonishment and pity. Why would I want you to work? Maybe because for 2 years you watched me work 14 hours a day to support you and you never once offered to help. Maybe because I think work would give you dignity, purpose, and something to be proud of. But we're family, Brandon insisted, and I could hear genuine desperation in his voice. Families support each other. You have the ability to support us, so you should do it. You're right about families, I admitted. Families do support each other, but support doesn't mean one person works like a slave while the other two live like freeloaders. Support means reciprocity, respect, mutual contribution. Ashley collapsed onto the sofa as if her legs could no longer hold her. I can't believe you're doing this. After everything we've been through together, after all the time we've spent as a family, you're kicking us out onto the street as if we were strangers. I'm not kicking you out onto the street, I corrected. I'm giving you apartments paid for 3 months and the opportunity to build your own lives. It's more generosity than you showed me when I needed understanding and respect. Brandon crumpled the lease agreements in his hands and threw them to the floor with a dramatic gesture. We're not leaving. This is our house too. We've lived here for 2 years. We have rights. I walked to another table where I had prepared more documents that morning. I took out a folder and opened it calmly. How interesting that you mention legal rights, Brandon, because it turns out I also consulted with a lawyer about that situation. His eyes fixed on the documents as if they were venomous snakes. According to the law, I continued, you have been guests in my house, not tenants. You have no lease agreement, you don't pay rent, and you have no legal right to remain here if I don't want you to stay. Ashley got up from the sofa with abrupt movements. This is revenge. You're being cruel and vindictive. The money has changed you, Eleanor. You've become a horrible person. I looked at her with a serene smile I had practiced in front of the mirror for days. You know what, Ashley? You're right. The money has changed me. It has given me something I hadn't had in years, the ability to choose how I want to be treated. And I have chosen that I don't want to be treated like your personal maid ever again. The air in the room was charged with tension, anger, and a growing desperation on the part of Brandon and Ashley. But I felt calmer and more powerful than I had in decades, because finally, after years of humiliation, I was in control, and the best part of all was that they hadn't yet heard the best part of my plan. Brandon picked up the crumpled contracts from the floor and smoothed them out with trembling hands, as if by doing so he could magically change the words that were written on them. Mom, you have to reconsider this. We're your only family. What are you going to do without us? Live alone in that new house like a hermit? Ashley wiped away tears that seemed to be more of anger than sadness. Eleanor, if you kick us out, you're going to regret it. You're going to be alone, completely alone. No one will visit you. No one will take care of you when you get sick. No one will be there when you need help. Her veiled threats would have terrified me a week ago, but now they only caused a mixture of pity and amusement. You know what's funny about what you just said, Ashley? You're describing exactly the life I've been living for the past 2 years. Alone, with no one to take care of me, with no one there when I need help. The only difference is that now I won't have to financially support the people who ignore me. I walked toward the window and looked outside, where I could see my neighbor, Mrs. Davis, watering her plants in the garden. Mrs. Davis, who always greeted me with a genuine smile when I came home tired from work. Mrs. Davis, who had offered me help more times in 2 years than Brandon and Ashley had in their entire lives. Besides, I continued without turning around, you seriously underestimate how many people there are in the world who know what it means to work hard, who understand the value of dedication and effort. I have experienced more genuine kindness from strangers who helped me with my grocery bags than I have received from you at home. Brandon came up behind me and put a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that would have been comforting coming from a son who truly loved me, but which from him felt manipulative and desperate. Mom, I'm sorry. Ashley and I are so sorry. If we did something that hurt you, it was without realizing it. We can change. We can be better. I turned to face him, and I could see his eyes were genuinely moist. But it wasn't regret I saw there. It was pure panic at the possibility of having to work for a living. Brandon, do you know how many times in these 2 years I thought about asking you to help me with something? How many times I wanted to tell you I was tired, that I was hurt, that I needed you to show me a little affection? His hand slid off my shoulder. Mom, you never said you needed help. I never said I needed help, I repeated, and my voice rose slightly. I came home every night with heavy bags, with swollen feet, with my back aching, and you didn't even look up from the television. Did you really think I didn't need help, or did you just not care? Ashley came closer too, and the two of them surrounded me like two desperate predators closing in on their prey. Eleanor, we understand you're upset. Maybe we were inconsiderate, but this is too drastic. Separating us, kicking us out of the house, forcing us to work. It's cruel. Cruel, I asked, and I laughed with a bitterness that had been accumulating for years. You want to know what's cruel? Cruel is coming home after a 14-hour workday and finding two healthy adults sprawled on the sofa, complaining that the food I brought isn't good enough. Cruel is working 2 jobs to pay the bills while I listen to you call me a failure. Cruel is washing the clothes of people who tell me I'm useless. Cruel is buying beer for people who invite their friends over to make fun of me in my own house. But we didn't know, Brandon began, but I interrupted him with a wave of my hand. Yes, you did, I said firmly. You knew exactly what you were doing. You enjoyed doing it. You turned it into entertainment for your friends. And now that you find out I have money, you want me to forget all that as if it never happened? Ashley changed tactics and became dramatic, putting her hands on her heart like a soap opera actress. Eleanor, we're family. Family forgives. Family doesn't abandon its members when they make mistakes. You're right about forgiveness, I admitted. That's why I'm giving you apartments paid for 3 months, instead of kicking you out on the street today. That's why I'm not charging you for 2 years of food, housing, and utilities. That's forgiveness. Brandon became desperate, and his mask of a repentant son began to crack. But the money is enough for everyone. $3 million. We could live comfortably for the rest of our lives. Why do you have to be so selfish? There it was, the word I had been waiting for. Selfish. Selfish, I repeated slowly. Brandon, for 2 years I spent every cent I earned on keeping this house and feeding 3 people. I worked until my hands were cracked and my feet were swollen so you could live without a care. And now that I finally have the opportunity to enjoy something for myself, I'm selfish for not wanting to continue supporting you? Ashley became furious, and her entire act of a concerned daughter-in-law disappeared like smoke. You know what, Eleanor? You're right. We're young, and we can work. But when you're an old hag and you need someone to take care of you, don't come crying to us. Her true personality had finally come to the surface, and I smiled with genuine satisfaction. Ashley, that threat would have worked a week ago when I was emotionally dependent on you, but now I have the resources to take care of myself. I can hire professional nurses who will treat me with respect, not like a burden. Brandon's face turned red with anger. Fine, Mom. If that's what you want, we're leaving. But don't expect us to come back when you realize your mistake. Don't expect us to come visit you in your new fancy house. I don't expect you to, I replied with a calmness that surprised him. In fact, I prefer that you don't, unless you come back with a completely different attitude and with evidence that you've learned what it means to work and contribute to society." Ashley picked up her purse from the sofa with abrupt, furious movements. "Brandon, let's go. We don't need to stay here listening to sermons from a bitter old woman who thinks she's better than us just because she inherited money she didn't even earn." Brandon followed her toward the door, but he stopped and turned to me one last time. "Mom, when you spend all that money on stupid things and you're poor and alone again, don't come asking us for forgiveness. This is your decision, and you're going to have to live with the consequences." I watched them walk away toward the door, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: pure and complete relief. "Brandon," I yelled before they left, "the apartments are available starting tomorrow. The keys are with the building manager. Your names are on the leases." They slammed the door to my house so hard it made the windows rattle, and for the first time in 2 years, my home was completely silent. A beautiful, peaceful silence, full of possibilities. I sat in my favorite armchair and looked around the living room that would soon no longer be mine. But that prospect didn't make me sad. On the contrary, it excited me to think about the new home that was waiting for me. A home where I would be respected, where my work would be valued, where my dignity would be protected. Because even though Brandon and Ashley didn't know it, my revenge was just beginning, and the best part of all was yet to come. 3 months later, I was sitting in the beautiful garden of my new house, enjoying a cup of coffee while reading the morning paper. My new home was everything I had dreamed of. 2 comfortable bedrooms, a modern kitchen, a living room full of natural light, and this perfect garden where I could grow the flowers I had always wanted to have. It was modest compared to what I could have bought with my inheritance, but it was exactly what I needed to start my new life. The doorbell rang, interrupting my moment of morning peace. Through the window, I could see a familiar figure walking nervously up to my front door. It was Brandon, but not the arrogant, lazy Brandon who had lived in my house for 2 years. This Brandon had wrinkled clothes, messy hair, and an expression of defeat I had never seen on his face. I opened the door slowly and could immediately see that the last few months had not been kind to him. He had lost weight, had deep dark circles under his eyes, and his hands were calloused and dirty, evidence that he had finally discovered what it meant to work with your hands. "Hi, Mom," he said in a voice that sounded completely different. Humble, tired, with no trace of the arrogance that had once characterized every word that came out of his mouth. Can I talk to you for a few minutes?" I invited him in, but he stood at the entrance, looking around my new house with eyes that mixed admiration and regret. "It's beautiful, Mom. It's perfect for you." We sat in my new living room, on furniture I had chosen myself, in a space that was completely mine. Brandon looked small on the sofa, like a child who had come to confess a terrible misdeed. "Mom," he began with difficulty, "I wanted to come and tell you that you were right about everything, about work, about independence, about how we treated you." His eyes filled with genuine tears, not the manipulative tears I had seen when he begged me not to kick them out. "I've been working in a factory for 2 months, he continued. 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. My hands are torn up, my feet are constantly sore, and I get home so tired I can barely eat before falling asleep. He paused and looked directly into my eyes, "And now I understand what you lived through for years to support us." I listened in silence without interrupting, watching as my son was finally learning lessons he should have learned decades ago. "Ashley and I separated," he confessed in a broken voice. "It turns out that when she didn't have your money keeping her comfortable, when she had to work cleaning offices at night, she decided she didn't love me anymore. She left with one of her bosses last week." I felt a pang of sadness for him, not because Ashley was gone, but because he had had to discover in the most painful way that his marriage had been built on my money and my work, not on true love. "I'm sorry, Brandon," I said sincerely. "I know it hurts." He nodded and wiped his eyes with the back of his calloused hand. But you know what, Mom? In a way, I'm glad, because for the first time in my life, I'm discovering who I really am when I have to fend for myself. And I don't like what I see, but at least it's real. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and his head in his hands. I've had a lot of time to think during these months, to remember all the times I humiliated you, that I treated you like our maid, that I allowed Ashley to disrespect you in your own house. Brandon. No, Mom. Let me finish. I need to say this. His voice became firmer. I was a horrible son. No, worse than horrible. I was cruel, selfish, and completely blind to everything you sacrificed for me. Not just during those 2 years, but my entire life. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where I had planted red roses that were now blooming beautifully. When I was a kid, I never lacked for anything. I always had food, clothes, toys, and education. I never wondered where it all came from. I never thought about how many hours you worked to give it to me. He turned to me, tears streaming down his cheeks. And when Dad died and you were left alone to support the house, instead of helping you, I became another burden. Ashley and I turned you into our personal employee, and the worst part of all is that we enjoyed it. I stood up and walked toward him. For the first time in years, I saw my real son beneath all the selfishness and laziness. I saw the boy he had been before life corrupted him. Brandon, I said softly, I appreciate you coming to apologize. It means a lot to me to hear these words. I didn't just come to apologize, Mom. I came to ask if someday you could forgive me, if someday we could try to rebuild a real relationship between a mother and son. I looked at him for a long moment, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, the genuine humility in his posture. Brandon, I forgave you months ago. Forgiveness isn't something I give when the other person deserves it. It's something I do for my own peace of mind. His eyes lit up with hope. Then could we try to start over? We can try to build something new, I said carefully. But it has to be based on mutual respect, on honesty, and on the understanding that we are both independent adults who take care of ourselves. He nodded vigorously. I understand. I don't expect you to support me ever again. I don't expect money or gifts or for you to solve my problems. I just hope that maybe with time you can come to feel proud of me again. Those words touched something deep in my heart. Brandon, I'm already proud of you. I'm proud that you had the courage to come here, to admit your mistakes, to work hard even when it's difficult. We hugged for the first time in years, and this hug was different. It wasn't the manipulative hug of someone who wanted something from me. It was the hug of a son who finally understood his mother's worth. When he left that afternoon, after we had tea and talked for hours about his plans to keep working and maybe go to school at night, I sat in my garden again and reflected on everything that had happened. My revenge hadn't been cruel or destructive. It had been educational. I had given Brandon and Ashley exactly what they needed. The opportunity to grow, to learn, to discover who they really were when they didn't have someone else solving their problems. Ashley had chosen the easy path again, finding another man to support her. But Brandon had chosen the difficult path, the path of personal growth and responsibility. As the sun set over my perfect garden, I remembered Peter's words the day I received my inheritance. Your life is about to change forever. He was right, but not just because I had money now. My life had changed because I had learned that respect isn't begged for. It's demanded. That true love is shown through actions, not empty words. And that sometimes the greatest kindness you can show someone is to force them to face the consequences of their decisions. My inheritance hadn't just given me financial security. It had given me something much more valuable. The strength to value myself, to demand the respect I deserved, and to build relationships based on real love, not on financial convenience. And as the sun went down over my perfect garden, I smiled, knowing that I had made the right decisions, that I had used my second chance at life not to get cruel revenge, but to teach with love the most important lesson of all, that human dignity is priceless and that it's never too late to start a new life. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.